Man, it is really, really beautiful behind you there.
Yeah, I'm on Oahu right now at my friend's house that I'm staying at. I just moved here like from a hotel last night. My old roommate, but they just bought this house and it's like insane. So they have an office I was like, the view on the lanai is so sick. Like,
oh yeah, that's, I mean, really,
look
really
at a little
crazy.
Paradise.
Yeah, absolutely. At first, when you paused a little when you said, I just moved here, and I thought you meant you just like, that was your house. And I was like,
no.
About to be real jealous.
I mean, I wish. I'm about to move, like in the spring to Thailand. So we'll be like similar, but I can't afford a house on Oahu. Probably.
Yeah, that's understandable.
But Thailand is like, it's like so cheap and like so safe and just like everyone's super chill. So
it's sounding pretty good right about now, man. I mean,
I'm having a really difficult time in this pressure cooker, if I'm honest.
How long have you been in Hawaii now? When'd you get in?
Like 2 days ago.
Nice.
Yeah, I have a show here on Friday. My mom moved out here when I was like super young. So I started coming out here when I was like 11. My dad was like, you can travel by yourself. And so I started flying from New York to Oahu, and spending some times in the summer. And then, when I was like 21, I was going to school at Hunter and my mom, got ill. She got like breast cancer. I was raised by my dad. So I moved out here to be with her through that. My mom's healthy and good now, but that's how I ended up moving to Oahu. But I started raving out here when I was like 15. So it's actually like, this is my first time actually like playing like a proper venue out here. Even though I've been spending a ton of times here. So it's kind of cool.
Yeah, that's a fun like full circle moment.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt you, but the guy who booked me is someone that I met back in that day. Like he was in high school when I was going to raves, and he was like a trance DJ back then.
Nice.
And so it's just interesting. Like it is very full circle.
Well, that's great. Was the 15-year-old raving out there, was that some of your earliest raving experiences?
Yeah. I started raving on the East Coast, but then like shortly after that, I came out here and I was like a big nerd. I went to summer school just like for kicks, because to get ahead, but also just because like I come from like an immigrant family where like education is very important. And I think like I was always concerned about like, using my time constructively in the summer. Like I didn't like just. So I came out here, went to summer school, and then I met some ravers that like tapped me
Did you
into
end
like
up
what was
kind
going on
of
here.
burning the candle at both ends? I'm relating slightly because I was and still am a huge nerd, and especially when I was a kid, I was good at school. I embraced a lot of schooling, but then I was also running off at night and going out to raves, and I was kind of doing it all because your body can handle it at that point. Was that you as well?
Absolutely. It's just like I try to, because now I am still doing that in a lot of ways, but I'm just like exhausted all the time. I feel like I've been tired for like, I don't know, at least like 8 or 9 years.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, that's funny. I mean, what was like the early raves in Hawaii like? Like, what was the vibe? Was it a lot of trance music? It
was like trance under the stars. So several of the venues that I would go to, they'd have like an outdoor area where it would be like the parking lot or something. So you'd be like under like the Hawaii night sky, or it'd be like Renegades, where you'd be like outside in like a beach park or something like that on the other side of the island. And then this one spot I remember going to a lot on the weekends, they would have like jungle and drum and bass inside. It was a rock climbing gym. So they had trance outside, drum and bass inside, or they'd like have house. But mostly it was like trance and drum and bass.
I guess I should even rewind for you. Like, what was your introduction to electronic music? Because if you're going to raves already at 15, I have to assume you've been aware of this music since before that.
Oh, no, that was like, through like media, before I started going to actual parties. It was like, I was on like AIM, like chat groups, like meeting other ravers and like figuring out where parties were and talking about music we found and were into. And like in New York City, there was this like a couple record shops I would go to. And
like, well, is this
music.
Like the Turntable Lab era, or is this before that?
Like Satellite Records was one of them, and Breakbeat Science.
Oh yeah, shout out to Breakbeat Science.
Yeah.
Were you born in New York?
I was born in Okinawa. So my dad was in the Marines and was stationed over there, and then met my mom. And then when I was like 2.5, he moved us back to the Bronx. So I grew up with his family, my Jamaican side, in the Bronx.
This is a really broad question and probably a shitty interview question, but I'm always curious from your perspective growing up in the Bronx. I think when people who aren't from New York hear the Bronx, like they get kind of, a stereotypical image, whether they know it from a rap song or whether they know it from a movie set. Like, if you just think about growing up there, what is your impression? Like, what images or sounds come to mind?
Puerto Rico. All my neighbors were Puerto Rican, and a lot of Puerto Rican flags everywhere. Like a lot of the people I went to school with, it was mostly like the same, like socio-economic class and like a lot of other Caribbean tourists. So immigrants. So like Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, we also had like South Asians and like some Russians and stuff like in my school. But like for the most part, it was like people that came to New York to try to build a better life for themselves. That makes and their
total
offspring.
Sense. And so your dad was with the military. What did your mom do?
She worked for like a travel agency. She didn't work. I think she was only in the States for like a couple years before she went back to Japan. So, and then she just retired. So my mom was out here, and she just retired last year, and she's going to move back to Japan, I think, in like a year.
Is there any musical background in your family?
Like I grew up, a lot of Jamaicans are super Christian. So I grew up going to church and just like singing in the church choir, and like my grandmother and my aunties, like I think in most cultures other than like maybe American or certain like European, it's just like everybody sings and dances. It's just like normal, like part of the culture. So I grew up in that sense, like music was always a part of life. But like me and my cousins, I remember we sang one Jamaica Day in Toronto when I was like 10 or something like that, or like 11 on stage, and we made up like dances like to go with these R&B songs. I like my mom had a baby Taylor. So when I came to Hawaii, I started like teaching myself how to play and sing at the same time when I was younger. But I didn't have any like formal musical training, and neither does anybody in my family.
If you look back at like that time and you as a kid, were you already the performer at that time, or were you kind of just doing what everyone was doing and it was just kind of part of regular life?
What's interesting is I've always had work that put me in front of people, but I don't know that I necessarily consider myself a performer. I consider myself an artist, and currently like music is the medium that I'm working with because financially it's sustainable, or it has managed to be sustainable for me. When I was younger, I was really into like painting and poetry, but that was because my family was really conservative and I wasn't allowed outside because this was like crack epidemic in the Bronx at the time.
Oh, wow.
So my family is really they were really strict, but they're also from Kingston, Jamaica, which was even more dangerous than where we moved to. And we were all, my family at the time was mostly women and like young girls. They didn't want us getting like knocked up super young or like on drugs or whatever. So we went to school and to church, and that was kind of it. And so I did a lot of indoor activities, like just a lot of like reading and schoolwork and writing. And then yeah, once I was like 17 and I moved out on my own, I was just like going crazy and like I was just like outside. I was like, I'm outside. Cause I also went to like a military boarding school for like 3 years in high school.
Oh yeah. So you'd had like, plenty of like, fences put up in different ways.
So once I was outside, I was just like, we outside. Like, yeah. So I just like, then it became I became really infatuated with like studying dance and like expression through movement, and really obsessed with like electronic dance music. Before I found dance music, I was actually like going to punk shows and ska shows.
That's awesome. I mean, it's interesting you say that, because I've just recently, this is neither here nor there, but I've just recently gotten back into going to a lot of like metal and hardcore shows, which is a thing I haven't done since I was like 15. And there's something about, there really is a connection there. Like if you took out the sonics and just thought about like the aesthetics and the philosophies, and like, I don't know, there's really a connection between dance music and, the punk side of things, the like metal side of things. I don't know. It's really interesting, but it's like scratching an itch for me right now.
I feel like I have pretty like niche taste. And a lot of the people that I've really connected with musically have very similar musical journeys in terms of like, before we had found like rave music or dance music, we were doing like the punk thing, or like, I even recently went to a friend's show, who's like touring with like a metal band, but they make like house and techno, and like they throw, I met them because, I played after party of theirs at Movement in Detroit. And they throw like a monthly party called Sleep Olympics in Detroit. But they are touring with a metal band right now.
That's awesome.
But yeah, like going and seeing their show in LA recently, and just like remembering that like energy, and was just like, oh, this is also really cathartic right now. And I feel like I've noticed like the punk scene and shows in LA are like massive, and the energy is just like really raw and really vibrant. And it makes a lot of sense for like, I'd say like where the country is politically.
Absolutely. Yeah. I just went and saw this Korean hardcore band called Slant. I don't know if you ever heard of them, but it was their first time in the US, I think. And they were playing this little tiny, like 100-person venue in town. And it was, beyond capacity, packed to the brim, and just like I hadn't seen energy like that at any kind of show in so long. And I'm still thinking about it. Like there is something happening with all of that. It's, I don't know. It's like one of those weird, it's almost like a cliche to say that, when times are bad politically, that's when we know we're going to get, the best art and the best, because I feel like in a weird way that puts kind of pressure on people who are making art to feel like they have to be saying something meaningful, or like they have to be making their best work. But I don't know, I do feel like that is maybe one of the very few silver linings of darker times like this. It's like, I know something artistically is going to come out of it that is going to blow me away, even if I can't tell you what it is.
I mean, I think we're in a really weird time right now when it comes to like a lot of art has just, it's not like a lot of it is just like created for consumption, right? So like it's no longer like maybe an authentic representation of like where someone's at personally, but a product for a market. So I feel like, yes, I like right now, we are seeing for sure there's a lot of response to what's going on in music and in art, in visual art, but also there's like maybe less than I would have expected, to be honest.
Yeah.
Considering how dire it feels like the situation is.
Yeah, I feel like
and
some
so,
people are kind of just resigned this time around. You know what I mean?
yeah. When I talk to people, a lot of it just seems like, people are scared. Like, at least like a lot of artists that I know, like they rely on this to survive, and that makes it harder to maybe be polarizing in your message.
Absolutely.
Because they're scared of, yeah, I think when you're hitting people in that survival space, like you're going to get survivalist type of responses,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's, no judgment on my end for anybody's choices. Like we all gotta, especially like you said, if music is your full-time thing, that's hard to do in any climate. And I have a lot of respect for people doing it regardless.
I think that, no, I would say, can I judge? Sure. But I would say like ultimately my harshest critique is with the systems that like force people to survive in this way. Like it's not really the fault of the people like struggling to survive. Rather, it's just the oppressive systems that create these dynamics and circumstances, I think, for people.
Yeah, that's completely right. And to be clear, I judge all the time, obviously, that's but I'm right there with you. And I remembered I was going to say too, when you were talking about your friend who was touring with the metal band, I was thinking about like that idea of mixed bills and presenting, maybe philosophically or aesthetically linked things that are maybe sonically different from each other, which is something probably because of what you're talking about too, that everything is a bit more packaged and commodified at this point, that like, I think we're seeing less of, and it's really refreshing to me to hear about it happening more, because I don't know about for you, but when I was
they're in the band.
Oh, they're in the band. I got you.
It's just like a different project. Yeah.
Check. Understood. Well, all I was really going to say based off of that was I feel like it's an interesting jumping off point to talk about sort of your curatorial skills and your label and the events that you put on, because I think you do a very good job of presenting and playing and just generally platforming a lot of different sounds and styles. And I think you're hard to pin down as an artist in a good way. And I think that is increasingly rare in these times, especially on a certain level of, doing it as a profession, as a touring artist. I think a lot of times, if like the industry can't immediately identify this is X kind of artist or this is X kind of genre, a lot of people will not engage with it. And so I don't know that I have a specific question, but I wanted to call it out because it's something I've always appreciated about your work. And I kind of just wanted to ask for you, like, how much of these kinds of ideas do you think about versus they're just instinctual? How much have you had to sort of think about how you are perceived in this industry in terms of like your sound and your style?
Oh my God. I think all of us, because it's like cult of personality these days, right? So it's so much about perception, and especially as like a marginalized identity, because I would say, on the industry level, not the community level, like, so not individuals that are putting their own time and energy and money to curate and throw events and put out music, but on the level of the beast of like the music industry, because I also work in those spaces as well. I'm usually like a total odd one out, but I also think it's both like a diversity box as well as like something kind of like just different. So I know like a lot of the artists that book me, I know directly that it's because like how I've managed to, I think, tour and have music be sustainable kind of globally has a lot to just do with like my connections to people and community. And I get booked, like I just played Red Rocks like last weekend for a pretty big dubstep artist called Of the Trees. And talking to some of the people that book that venue regularly, who had booked me for a festival like last spring when I first met them, about just like this journey and what I'm doing. And I was like, they were like, oh, who's representing you now? And I was like, I got rid of all of those people like a while back because I just felt like they have their own like agendas and their own goals that if you don't know who you are, it's very easy for them to kind of be like, oh, you have to do it like this, and you have to do this, and you have to do that, and you have to play this venue, then that venue, and you can't play with that artist. And that, it's like all of these weird rules that they've like made up, but these people are like literally not connected to culture or community or music. Like they rarely know much about music. So it's like, why would I listen to you if like my like passions don't actually connect with your like financial and like, I don't know, like numbers, like understanding of what this is. I tried that for a little bit, but it got me in like spaces around people that I didn't really align with. So, and in ways that just felt very like right before COVID happened, I remember finding myself like, just like, I don't really connects with a lot of the music that's happening at some of these festivals and shows that I'm playing at. And I don't like know who a lot of these people are. And it was just like I realized that like I was missing the point of why I had started doing this in the first place. Like my name is my name because I didn't have an agenda when it came to playing music. I just wanted to share cool music that I love and create spaces for people to dance and connect and let go and to be with my friends doing cool shit. It's just been a very organic journey. I've tried different things on, like, I would say the thing that got me outside of being a local DJ in New York, because I was playing like all kinds of things. Like I was like, had a residency of my rock climbing gym and playing like,
Nice.
like literally all kinds of like weddings and corporate events and whatever.
I used to DJ at a bowling alley, so I'm right there with you.
And like retail stores. And but what got me out of my city was actually music that was really different from what I was doing inside cities. So I was inside New York. I was playing a lot of like, they call like global bass. So like dancehall, reggaeton, dembow, baile funk, Afro house, Latin house. So I was being booked in a lot of those spaces. And then I started throwing parties because I wanted to play a lot more heavier bass music that I loved and was listening to and collecting, that weren't appropriate for a lot of the gigs I was receiving. But when I started specializing, I had a radio show that was focused, it was a UK radio show, but it was focusing on like 160, like the spectrum of like 160 BPM.
What station was it, out of curiosity?
Radar.
Okay.
Which doesn't exist anymore. They got canceled.
Got it.
But Radar Radio. And there's a lot of artists that came out of there, like Sicaria Sound is kind of big now.
Yeah. I know.
We're now just Sicaria.
Right.
In the States, but they used to manage and have a show like right before mine. But it was mostly like UK artists. And I used to play for like 4 years in a row. I played at this festival called Outlook. That's in Croatia. But it's almost like 95% like British artists. And they started bringing me there. And because I was playing so much like sound system music, I realized most of the producers were going to be there. So then I was like, okay, well, I want to present something that's specifically North American, that's really different from what people would be playing. And at the time, the 160, like footwork, juke, booty house, that hadn't really kind of like reached there yet. It wasn't really so much of a thing. So I decided to present a set that was like this sound that nobody else would be playing. And then someone contacted me after that and asked me if I would do a radio show educating their audience about the sound. And so that was really what enabled me, I think, to get out of like just playing locally.
Right.
I actually specialized in that sound for a few years, at least outside of my city.
Yeah, that's really big. And I think maybe some people underestimate that, like really leaning into what you like and what you don't like, and not necessarily feeling like you have to exclusively cater to a crowd or exclusively fit into one scene or another, exactly. Like, I think a lot of younger artists get caught up in like, well, what I really like, or, the stuff that's most cool to me just doesn't exactly fit in one of these things. So, I want to make a go of this. So I need to change what I'm doing somehow to kind of fit in with what I see working, which is like, to a certain point valid, that like, yes, you need to make sure that what you do can be comprehended by somebody else. But yeah, I think that's a really good point, that like you do also kind of have to like stick to your guns to a certain extent.
I mean, I think it depends on what your goals are, but if I was just doing something that I thought other people wanted me to, well, first of all, like, you're not psychic. So you have no idea what it is people want from you, really.
That's a great point.
Like, so if you're trying to like guess, like you're second guessing yourself and trying to present something that you like think people want, like, that sounds like a losing game, actually, and like really frustrating.
Totally. And that just makes me think of, I've talked to a lot of people on here, and there's plenty of famous stories out there of like so many of the biggest hit songs in existence, when the person made them, it was like a tossed off thing. It was never. Yeah. And then if you ever set out and you're like, now I'm going to write the hit, it's going to not work.
Totally.
Ever,
Totally. Yeah, I think people seem to respond, at least in my experience, they respond best like when I'm genuinely enjoying what I'm doing, having a good time. That energy is translated and people pick up on it. There's definitely ways of presenting stuff that are new to people in a way that's palatable or like accessible to them, which I think is one of the reasons I've managed to have a sustainable career playing very underground music in kind of big festival settings, or like big sort of, like more whatever spaces, is because I have enough empathy to understand the audiences I'm in front of, to like figure out how to bridge the gap between like what I want to show them and like where they're used to being.
Right, right. Well, how was Red Rocks on that note?
It was so crazy. I saw like there's a tunnel where you go and sign your name, and the guy in the tunnel, he was really sweet. And he was like, I saw you play at like Texas Eclipse. I like loved your set. And I was like, oh, cool. And then he was like, look at this. And right above him was a Michael Jackson signature. And I was like, that's the only person when I was like a kid, I like sent him like mail. Like only one time ever I sent a famous person mail. It was Michael Jackson.
I used to try to dance like Michael Jackson.
I wanted to be him so bad.
It was bad. Yeah.
But yeah, so that was wild.
Michael Jackson at Red Rocks. I did not even realize that they intersected. You know what I mean?
Me neither. Yeah. It was crazy to see that. And all of the like, it's an iconic space. And like crazy, like just the setup, like the way that you're surrounded by the mountains and the way that the seats kind of go up, so you can kind of see everybody.
Right.
It's not just like when you're looking out. I've played like, I would say like probably the crowd at Texas Eclipse was about the same amount of people, like 10K, but everyone's flat. Right. So you just see people. It's not the same as like seeing people's faces that are all the way up there, which is pretty cool. The set, it was a lot of like dubs from homies that they had recently sent me. But I kind of started with like, it's a dubstep crowd. So I started at a place that I knew that they would get it. And like one of my friends that makes techno, like just put out a dubstep EP that's just like fire that I really liked, that was like super deep. And I was like, oh, they'll get this. And then I went into like, I think the journey for me, I realized is always kind of the same. Like we have our personal story that we're telling anytime we perform, anytime we present work. I think that goes across mediums as well. But I realized it doesn't matter what genre or what BPMs I'm working in. The story, the narrative is always kind of the same. And so it is very much often about like me, like meeting. It's like an introduction. It's like, I see you. And, like I see the crowd, I see where you're at, I know what you like. I'm going to give you a little taste of that so that you trust me. And then I start to pull you into like the longer I play, the weirder it gets, or the like further it gets away from like what they might be comfortable with.
Right.
So I started like 140 and like ended in like jungle. At my core, when it comes to like rave and stuff, like I'm a junglist, and it's been really exciting lately to be able to, there's been several festivals that have reached out that have booked me for like 2 sets where I do whatever the multi-genre thing now, and then they'll be like, can you play drum and bass? And I'm like, what? Because I feel like all these years I've been like kind of sneaking it in,
Yeah, of course.
like a little bit, or even like jungle, to get like such strong responses in the last couple years to this music, and not feeling like it feels less like I'm getting away with something, and like more like people are actually really ready and into this right now, which is cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I'm sure you've seen this as much as I have over the years, but it's like, I feel like every few years, maybe like every 4 to 5 years, there's the conversation in the ether of like, oh, this is going to be drum and bass.
Yeah, this is the year.
This is the year for the States in drum and bass. And I heard it so many times that I kind of just started tuning it out. And then over the last couple of years, I came back around. I was like, maybe this really is the time, It's like, it really has some staying power in the States in a way that I have not seen in 20 years of DJing.
And not just the States, like, I remember, I think it was like last year, like, Nia Archives, who's like a young junglist, songwriter, vocalist, DJ, producer, opened for Beyonce.
Yeah, it's crazy.
In London. And I was like, when you have a jungle artist opening for Beyonce, it's different. Like, times have changed,
Absolutely. Yeah. And you're seeing, I don't know, I think, you tell me what you think. I feel like you're seeing the adoption of it on multiple levels at the same time, too. Like, it's not only is it at like the big EDM stage, and, there's like the pop side of it that's, also happening.
Right.
But then the underground, too, like I'm seeing a lot of young, bass artists making weird, wonky music start to make drum and bass tunes as well, that would never work in the big festival context. But it's like, it's all kind of happening at the same time. And I don't know if I'm smart enough to assess like what is happening to align all of this energy at the same time, but it is really fun to watch.
I think some of it's nostalgia, like, and just like the whole like timing about like how things circle back around. I think part of it is that, like, I've just been doing what I do until like people are into it again. Right. Like, I feel like if you just keep doing whatever it is you do, at some point it'll come back around and people will be like, wait, we fuck with this. And it's really cool right now too to see also like a lot of like, I think one of the reasons I'm getting booked now by a lot of kind of like more like bass artists has a lot to do with their interest in like club music as well. So I'm noticing more and more like club producers making like either faster BPMs or more double time stuff, or like just club music, like which is cool. And it makes sense because like, at some point people are looking for interesting things. It's not unusual for like the underground to be mined for new ideas and kind of fresh ideas. And these things have been going on for a really long time in the underground, but they haven't yet reached that kind of like mainstream sort of like popularity or like saturation in the mainstream yet. So it's still like new to a lot of people and exciting. And so I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think about that underground mainstream divide a lot, and it's something I talk about a lot on this podcast too, because for me it's like I'm a pretty simple guy, and it's like I like a lot of weird underground music, and I like a lot of very mainstream poppy music. And for me, it's sort of just DJ brain, where like I can see a lot of the connections between the music, and in my head a lot of it fits together. And then I have some cognitive dissonance because obviously sort of philosophically and class-wise, in a lot of different ways, those scenes don't mesh, like the underground and mainstream. And so for me, like, maybe if we used like this drum and bass wave of interest as a case study, like I'm always wondering how can this best benefit and not just take from the underground? Because you want more attention and you want more money to go to the underground, but you also don't want to sort of just package and commodify the culture there to be, exported elsewhere. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I consider that, to be honest, like what EDM is. It's the commodification of dance culture.
Oh,
it's
absolutely.
like,
yeah.
The rock and roll people like basically put that touring model on dance music. They manufactured EDM. They, created a whole world that was very separate from like what was actually happening in the underground once they realized like there was music or like money to be made by this music. And it took a few people like Paul Cox or, Digweed, I think, or like, and created like these superstar DJs, out of them. But like, I think that what we're seeing is a little bit of both, because I noticed like the North American drum and bass DJs, it's that like festival sound, that like big room kind of like stuff I'm like not particularly into.
Right.
And then like, but then I also notice when it comes to like the interest of artists itself. So a lot of it has to do with like how does it happen where the people who are actually like originators or, get tapped to work with artists that are doing bigger things so that, there's awareness around who these people are or what this music is, has a lot to do with just like individuals, like people having a seat at the table who know music, who like know who the right people are to get either in collaboration with some of these bigger artists or opening on their tours. Like people that actually represent the culture and the sound. Someone like, and it takes like artists being involved in how things are executed and actually being passionate about culture to do that. So some of them will do that. And then it also takes, some like the knowledge of certain curators or certain venues, I think, to be like, oh, this is the person in this community that should be opening for this act that's coming through, rather than I'm just going to like, put my friend's artists on, even though it has nothing to do with like what this thing actually is.
Right. Yeah. Or kind of just like ride this successful brand or this successful trend without really looking into why it's popping right now,
Yeah. And I think we see both like often. For more than ever recently, though, I'm happy to see when I see, like, for instance, like Nia Archives, a lot of that curation she's involved with. And so, she's putting on these like young jungleists in cities that she's playing with sometimes. And then I think that's really great. Or right now I'm touring with the Glitch Mob, who have been doing this rave revival moment.
Those are my guys. I love them, man.
They're honestly some of the most like genuine and just like kind and like committed, just like beautiful music humans I have met in my journey. And I'm very grateful to them for putting me on.
They're so cool, man. And they're like rave revival sound that you mentioned too. Because I always like them. They've always been super, super talented. And then when they started doing that, they switched up the sound a bit. I locked in with it so hard. And I think it's, to take it back to something you were talking about earlier, it's sort of because you could feel their energy and excitement for it. And, in the same way that you were talking about, like leaning into what you were really passionate about, like that, when you do it right, that really does translate through the music. And all of their new music, man, yeah, it's just so electric, I think, partially because of that.
Oh, yeah, they're into it. They're super into it. Yeah. They're making new tracks all the time. They have their new label, All the People. And they're really pulling from community. So like the acts that they have opening in different cities, they're the people in those cities who have been pushing these sounds, whether it's the club, music or the rave music or the jungle, but it's connected to the places and the culture. It's not just like, oh, our management said put this person on. So,
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and for you too, like, where do you feel like you're focusing as like your own self, your own artist, your own project right now? Because you do so many things. You curate a label, events, mixes, you produce, you do all of these things. Do you feel like, is there any one piece of it, you tour all of this, is there any one piece of it that's like most exciting or most fun to you right now?
I would say like playing the shows that are good are the most fun. But the thing is, like, I have painted myself into a corner where like this is like what I rely on to survive financially. And so I'm looking forward to taking a bit of break. So I'm going to move to Thailand, I think, in like next spring. And partially it's just because it's like really affordable. I don't have to grind and like worry so much about just like paying rent, so that I can actually focus a lot more on my own artistic expression. So much of what I do really is like in service to like music and community and these spaces. And while I would say it's authentic in terms of like me curating what I like, that also feels appropriate for the moments that I'm in. It's also, I was just listening back to like a ton of like whips and realized that like my sound. So like if you look at some of the earlier stuff I put out, there's a very specific like sound there that's less about when I knew less about how to make music. And when I listen recently to a lot of just like ideas and whips, that sound, which is very much like what I would say is like what I sound like when when I'm not performing. I'm really interested in delving into that more. And I haven't really had the space to do it because of just like trying to survive. So I'm really looking forward to it's a deeper sound that's actually like a lot more organic, but also industrial. And I'm looking forward to like finishing up and like creating, because I started producing after I started DJing. And because I was a raver for so long, as soon as I started DJing, I pretty much had a career because I was in New York City. Right. And all my friends were like promoters and DJs. So they started putting me on. And then as soon as I started playing out, like, one gig would lead to another. And I got really busy really fast. And then like I naturally just started making edits for sets that were inspired usually by sets. And then people started asking me for those edits, and labels started asking for music. And so I was kind of just like, okay, I'll figure it out. But it wasn't like an intent. And so a lot of I have released comes from, like someone asking me for something and me being like, cool, like what do I sound like in that context? And so, yeah, I right now have just been focusing on like playing shows and like making ends meet, because like capitalism, but like, I'm looking forward to kind of extracting myself a little bit outside of that rat race to like focus a lot more on like my own personal expression, and like even very curious what I sound like without the dance floor, sure, like without it being aimed in that direction as well.
Yeah, it's such an interesting thing to think about. I was a DJ for many years before I was a producer too, and I remember kind of when I started first making music, it's a weird thing to like think like, well, what do I sound like? Like that's such a weird question to try to answer. And now that you're talking, I'm realizing at the start for me too, I probably was filtering that through the lens of like, well, I need stuff I can play at these gigs I'm already playing. And it's such an interesting, and that the answer to that question is going to keep changing and evolving. Absolutely. Too. But that's so fun. It's really nice to think about you having that time and being out in Thailand. And it's a good note, I think, for any up and coming producers, DJs, artists, whoever that is listening or watching to this, that like, if you do have the ability to change your circumstances somewhat to give yourself a little breathing room, I think a lot of people, especially more, I guess, on the EDM side of things, like there's this constant pressure that like it has to be happening now. You have to be constantly engaging. You have to always be sort of pushing the ball further down the field. And I think it's such a good note and a good reminder that if you do have the ability to take a second to take your foot off the gas, sometimes that is really the best thing you can do for yourself.
I feel like it's really important to pause and get clarity around like if your life looks like what you want it to look like. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, there's no one else you can hold responsible for that other than yourselves. And I do think like we owe it to our, like if there's a power that like put us here, if there's like, I feel like what we owe it is just to be aware and to be present and to be authentic and to actually like enjoy this like gift, because like fact is like statistically we shouldn't be here. Like we shouldn't be here.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So like the fact that we're anything at all is so mind blowing, and that we have the ability to like be self-aware and create art and live on this crazy place. Like, I feel like those pauses, especially like, if you're in an industry and you have, you have a team of people telling you like what it should be and what you should be doing and blah, blah, blah. I think it's kind of easy to get wrapped up in, people's perceptions of you, or like feeling like you have to chase something. I think I probably have the benefit of like, I didn't start doing this until much later in life, after I had, several businesses I used to be a massage therapist for like 6 years. I was a yoga teacher for a decade. I started and closed several businesses doing wellness work. And then, I was like 30 when I started DJing. So, it's been over a decade now. And so it makes me difficult to work with, I think, for the people who want to tell you how to do things and what you should do,
Sure.
because I know who I am. And I am not really interested in being like, I guess like having that impeded upon by expectations of other people or the industry. Like my life is pretty sacred to me. And like, I want to enjoy it.
Well, man, I love hearing that. And I love getting those kinds of ideas out there more, because that to me is like really if there is a secret to life, that's what it is. And for this kind of career too, as an artist, as a musician, having that kind of mindset, regardless of like if a million opportunities or no opportunities come your way, that's the only way to ensure that you're going to appreciate and enjoy them when they do, is to have like done it on your terms in a way that fits into your life and fulfills you. Because so many times, I mean, again, I think this is a relatable thing for a lot of people who try to do music. It's like so many times you achieve something and it doesn't feel the way you thought it would, or it doesn't feel fulfilling. And I mean, I've had God knows how many of those moments over the course of my career. And, each time you sort of look back and you realize it's like, oh, well, maybe I wasn't trying to do this for the right reason, or maybe I was trying to do this because it was what somebody else wanted and I saw them wanting it. And so I thought I should do it, or kind of just because the reasons you were talking about earlier with, the industry side of things, there's like an established hierarchy of what we're told, we should want, or the order of things, the rungs we should climb to get to a certain point. And it is all very manufactured. None of it is about you as an individual.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
I just don't think any of it's like real. Like I think, I mean, like it's real if it is real for you, but
Right.
like I think in actuality, like um people I remember early on people telling me like you have to pick a sound or like you have to do this or you have to do that, and I'm like, who says? Like, why? Yeah, I feel like for me, whether it's music, whether it's this medium, any other, or just my life in general, it's like really important to me that that it feels good and it feels authentic, and that's just like whatever comes from that is what I'll accept, you know, like whatever. It's like, for instance, like I remember doing this really young, like with my family, you know, like being like open about like I'm very unconventional in my views and my family's pretty conservative. But I decided really young that I had to be upfront with them about who I was, because otherwise, like, do they love me or do they love some idea that I'm fitting into to make them happy? And then at that point, you don't know. Like, so whatever exchange or dynamic exists there, it's not a real one. And like more than anything, like I want to feel like something's real. Like I want to feel like yeah, like I made it doing what felt good for me and what was authentic for me as an artist versus like, you know, checking a bunch of boxes someone said I was supposed to, and then being like, what does any of this mean or what does it matter? You know, like I think I watched enough people kind of go through that to like be really clear about it. Like I've had friends that were doing really well, doing like EDM stuff, but like miserable,
Yeah.
like really unhappy and
there's
didn't like
lots
the
of those,
music
yeah.
and like, yeah. And I was just like, what? And it was like blowing my mind. I'm like, why would you just stop doing this? Do something that makes you happy. Like, what are you doing? And they'd be like, no, but it makes all this money. And I have all these people relying on me because I have like this team of people and da 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 and all this stuff. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, okay. But also like, what's the point of any of it if you're not like happy and like, if you don't feel like, because like whatever love you're receiving for playing this role isn't really gonna touch you. Like you're not gonna
Yeah.
feel it because it's not really meant for you. Like,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think so much of that is like a fear-based response too, where it's like, if I don't have this, you know, I guess for starters, will I survive? But also like, if I'm not this thing, then who am I? I think so many people like wrap their identity up in what they're doing. And then, especially if you do it on a high level, it gets almost impossible to separate. And I'm curious too, like, because you do clearly have a good head on your shoulders for this kind of thing. And I think it sounds like you've had a pretty strong perspective on how you want to do this from a young age. Like, have you ever thought about where that comes from, or like how you arrived at that point?
I think some of it is just like internal compass that I'm not really sure like of the like origin. But I think some of it is just like growing up in a really like conservative environment, like I said, in my household, and not identifying with that environment, and being really sensitive. Like I was actually like a pretty depressed kid, and so now, you know, it's interesting. I feel like I see a lot of people talking about depression like it's this really bad thing, but I also think it's a blessing in a lot of ways, and it can be really healing because it often shows us what's not working. It tells us, it's giving us really clear information that like our life isn't really like aligned. And so for me also, there's once I feel like something isn't in alignment, or I can identify like that something isn't in alignment, I have to kind of like take a moment to really think about like, well, what is in alignment and what do I want, and walk in that direction. Because if I don't, I get like really dark really fast. Like I get really depressed, and then I'm like, what's the point of any of this? Like, you know, like it's just like very dramatic, very fast. So I really am committed to staying in a place that like feels good. And even if there's moments where that's not always the case or not always possible, at least I understand why and what's happening and how to get back there eventually. So yeah, I would say probably my commitment to like just like authenticity and like really feeling aligned with what I'm doing in my life is based also in survival. Like,
yeah, that makes total sense. I'm curious, like the switch to DJing full time when you were 30 and leaving behind the things you had been doing previously, was that sort of adjacent to these ideas we're talking about here of like, something doesn't feel right, I want to go in a different direction?
Yeah, well, because it was a mixture of things, but I was touring a lot more on the weekends, like playing a lot more festivals, and I was getting like emails and DMs and things like that from clients being like, where are you? Do you even teach at the studio anymore?
Right.
How come you're not available? And people get really attached to their massage therapists and their like yoga teachers. And I started feeling like I was having a difficult time being client-centered. Like if it wasn't music, I wasn't as interested in it anymore. My heart wasn't there. So I was like, you know what? I owe it to myself and also everyone around me to just like put my energy like where my heart clearly is right now. Throw my eggs all in that basket for a while. Cause I'm still like, at that point, I was like, I'm still young enough to like go for broke, like to fail and still have enough time to recover and do something else if that's not working. But I also have so many of my friends are a lot older in music that had been doing music a long time that hadn't ever really taken that leap of like, what if, like, how far can I push this? So I kind of felt like it was like important that I just did that, you know, just to see, like, rather than like just being like, oh, like that's not possible, or I don't know. Like I just felt like I really owed it to myself to just just like fully go there and see, but also to do it in a way that felt like natural and authentic to me, you know. Which
absolutely. And I think maybe there's something to be said too for not that you were consciously waiting until that point, but it's like, you know, instead of rushing it and feeling like I have to do it immediately once I have the interest, it's like you kind of wait until the signs are there and until it's sort of like an inescapable reality, you know?
Yeah, I think like I don't ask for gigs, like, and I have been really particular about that because I want to feel like invited and welcome into the spaces where I put my time and energy, rather than like, oh, I'm just here because I'm trying to accomplish some like lofty goal or something like that. And so it's a lot of how I've navigated this industry and like this career has been like super organic and just like me like saying yes to a lot of things and or no, you know, to things that didn't really suit me. But it was very much about I'm here because people have made space for me to be here and they've asked me to be here and they are interested in what I'm doing. And it's a very fickle industry. So at some point, you know, that will probably stop and people won't be interested and then I'll go do some other stuff. But as long as they want to book me and they're like interested, you know, in listening to me play music or interested in the artist that I'm putting on, I'm happy to do this.
I love it. And am I right that you also at one point were working in events as well?
That's actually how I started. Like before I was DJing, when I was like 21, I moved to Hawaii and I was, at the time I was like a fire performer and I met these artists, like these other people through fire community and I moved into a house and then we started throwing like little festivals, like, you know, 250 person festivals out here on the west side, like private camping grounds. It's just like our homies for like the weekend. And that's how I started doing events. And then I kind of just got this like bug where anytime I go into like a cool space, like I look at it, like the first thing in my head is like, oh, we should have a party here.
Right.
You know, like,
man, the little fire community is just such a fun idea. Those parties, like, is it just, is it the like the fire on, what do they call it? Is it poi?
Yeah, I was a poi spinner.
Yeah. That shit is so fun, man. That's
I'm really just a pyro. So like any excuse to play with fire, I'm like about it, you know. But
I love it. But there's also something cute about that too. You know what I mean? I don't know what that is. It's like lawless, but also cute.
yeah, I feel like also like a lot of, I mean, you know, there's all kinds of people now. It's grown a lot since when I was doing it back then, but I feel like there's a lot of really playful, like there's a strong crossover in that with that community, and also like clowning community and like circus community.
Yeah.
So like people that are just like really silly and like naturally like adventurous and like explorative.
Playful is a better word than cute.
Yeah,
You're
it's
right.
very playful, and I think that's like play is probably one of my like core values. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's something I realize more and more as I get older, ironically, is like how important the idea of play is, and making sure that everything I'm doing feels like play as much as possible. It's something that I don't know that every artist or DJ or producer thinks about all the time. But for me, I'm like, oh no, that's kind of the key to everything. It's like,
it's like, it's the super juice, like behind anything. Like, so long as like you're enjoying it and you're having fun. And, you know, I remember reading somewhere, like, it's like you learn something like twice as fast or twice as much if you're laughing in the process. Like if you're enjoying yourself while you're trying to learn stuff or you're trying to execute stuff, it's just like a lot more successful if like play and like ease are involved and there's not like so much gripping. I do mean like so many of my friends in music are a lot younger than me, and like think they've come up at it, like they came up like always having social media. And so there's always this like being watched kind of feeling, and like there's like, yeah, they want this like that they want this music thing so badly, so there's this gripping that makes it like a lot less fun sometimes.
Yeah, and that they have to be so like, polished so early, you know what I mean?
Yeah, or like this, like you have to be perfect. Like people are like, oh, I don't want to put this out because it's not good, or like, you know, or there's I feel like we do a disservice when we aren't like allowing ourselves maybe, or not just for ourselves but also other people, when we aren't allowing for ourselves to like be human, or for other people to also like understand like that, like not like you don't have to be perfect to be an artist, or you don't have to be perfect to be doing whatever it is in front of people. Like, and actually, it's the imperfections and it's the struggle that like we probably learn the most from, honestly, and gain the most from.
Oh yeah, I've said this probably 100 times on this podcast, but I think the only way I've really learned anything that I have taken with me in this whole life is by doing it wrong the first time, you know?
Yeah. And I think if you're really like doing it like it matters, or like, you know, you're pushing it and you're doing it like you care, like you're gonna mess up, like you inevitably are gonna mess up, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
which can also be fun if you approach it
totally.
with the right attitude.
With the right attitude.
Yeah, it can also be not fun at all. But well, I feel like I want to wrap it up in a minute, but I want to make sure, because I mentioned a couple times your Worst Behavior label, but I feel like we maybe haven't given people the context who don't know like what the label is all about and kind of what's going on with it right now.
Well, the label is actually no more. So the last release we did, which was Dr. Jeep, which was very full circle for me, because like he's like one of my like really big influences
Dr.
in music.
Jeep is dope, yeah.
He's so like, like talk about like a multi-genre artist, multi-genre DJ, producer, who also gave himself time to ask, like, wait, is this pathway like really what I want? Reestablished himself. Now he's doing exactly what he wants to be doing, putting out exactly the type of music he wants to be putting out, playing alongside the community and people he really resonates with. Like, I feel like it is a harder path, not kind of like picking a genre and like actually being honest with like if you're someone who is really multifaceted in terms of how you hear and understand music. It's a harder path. I think it takes like it's slower for sure.
Yeah.
But if that's how your brain works and that's how you enjoy life and how you interpret things, I think there's not really another way.
There you go. Yeah, it's kind of echoes of what we were saying earlier. Yeah, absolutely. Is the Footwork Jungle series?
I still do the Footwork Jungle series. Yeah, so that is like we basically I premiere music for labels that are still working in that realm. These days, it's actually interesting. It's a lot more like jungle and like rave revival stuff that people are sending and submitting, and even like some drum and bass, which we've kind of stretched the sound a little bit to be like, because for me, ultimately, first, it's about community. So it's like, you know, labels that were doing a lot of this like hybrid 160 stuff who are now doing a little bit more like DMB oriented stuff, but we're still doing some premieres and stuff for them. And then actually this morning, we just dropped a new mix 114 with Soft Stuff, who's like a Glasgow-based curator and DJ they booked me in Glasgow like last spring, but also had played, I saw them play like one of my tracks on like Keep Hush, and they did like this really cool like 160 kind of like hybrid jungle section. And so I invited them onto the series. I try to keep it international, but also across a lot of different communities, just so people understand that the sound is actually super versatile. And I love to hear different people's approaches. So we're up to mix 114. This series was started by my friend Homesick. He also is who does the art, like the artwork for it still. Basically, like when I started Worst Behavior, when we started Worst Behavior, I reached out to him to do a premiere. And he was like, oh, I stopped doing it. It was just like a lot to do by myself. And like, I was like, what? And he's like, I can't even upload anything because I don't have like the account where like he wasn't paying for a premium on SoundCloud. I was like, what if I just give you the money for the premium and you do the premiere? And he's like, well, do you want to help me with it? And I was like, well, what do you want to do? He's like, I just want to do the art. And I was like, all right, sure. Like, cause I was like, it makes me sad because this was literally like my favorite music blog.
Yeah.
So I continue to, and I'm excited. We have a bunch of really cool mixes coming up in the next few months.
I mean, that's beautiful, not only because it's a labor of love, right? It's like continuing a thing that meant something to you in an earlier phase of your life. But I'm sure you've also, through doing that, just another lesson for anybody out there listening is like, I'm sure you've made a lot of great connections and relationships by putting in that work to sustain the thing that you loved when you were coming up. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like, I feel like it's all cyclical and it all feeds into each other itself. And, I get the question a lot from people, like, how do I get booked? Or like, how are you doing this? How do you build a career? And, I think it's kind of hard to give advice because I do think everybody's path is really different. So, what probably has worked for me may not work for other people, but a lot of it has been through building platforms for other people and to celebrate music and community. And I think, people genuinely appreciate it and they often reciprocate.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, this has been great. I'm having a great time talking to you. Before we wrap it up, is there anything we haven't talked about? Anything else you got on your mind or you want to get out there? I know you're on tour like crazy as always, and we're going to put the links to all your dates and the mix series and all that where people can find them. But anything else going on that we haven't talked about?
Tomorrow, Chicago legend DJ Slugo remixed a track of mine, and he's dropping it tomorrow. That's huge for me.
Oh man, I came up as a DJ when I was living in Chicago, so all that stuff is very close to my heart.
Yeah, that drops tomorrow, and he put it out on his label. And then I'm playing in Hawaii also tomorrow. I don't know. I didn't really come into
Oh, you don't have to. Yeah, you
I
don't
didn't
have
really
to have
come into
anything.
it thinking about anything other than like we were gonna like have a chat and see where it went. So
No, this has been great. I hope you had a good time because I really enjoyed this.
yeah, I mean, I'm a talker, so I can chat about like music, and the experiences I've had within it probably forever. And so I've really enjoyed this also, and like I appreciate you for having me.
No, of course. Yeah, I hope you have a great show in Hawaii. By the time people hear this, which I think is going to be next week, that will have happened. So I hope it was a good show. Are you like touring heavy throughout? I mean, I'm sure through the new year, but like, what's your next year look like?
I am taking New Year's off because like lately the last few years, like my partner has like requested that I
well, that's important
spend New Year's
too.
with them, and
that's
so I'm like,
too.
all right, cool.
And I feel like New Year's gigs, it's like a shiny thing when you start off, and then once you do enough of them, you're kind of like, it's not always.
It just depends. It just depends. But like, if it's with a lot of community, then I think it makes sense because you just want to be around your loved ones on New Year's, right? And you want to be like happy and like, you're setting the tone for the year. I think, and I've got quite a few dates still with the Glitch Mob through like mid-January. I'll go home to New York to play like a drum and bass show January, and I basically until like the end of February. I haven't announced everything, but
sure.
And then I'm gonna hopefully take a break for like a while.
Yeah. And go off to Thailand. That's so exciting to think about. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks again.
Thanks, Willy.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.